earlier. Let's bring in retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, Fox News contributor and a former national security advisor.
Hi, General.
To Vice President Pence. So, General, does it look like we spent $1 million to take down a $12 hobby balloon over the Yukon?
Yes. And I think they're 1 in 3, meaning they've got one Chinese spy balloon and they've got some industrial balloons and weather balloons shot down. This goes back, I'm actually stunned by this because this shows a lack of coordination, a lack of serious decision making in the White House. Simple rules of engagement. They call them ROE, strategic and operational tactical level. Mm-hmm. These are decisions that are made. We tell the military commanders when they can go weapons free, when they can shoot, what they can shoot, and why they can shoot. That comes out of the White House. It comes out of the Pentagon. And clearly these pilots are basically told if it flies, it dies. That's a terrible way to make decisions. When I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, when we had a decision to shoot down aircraft, when I heard the Vice President of the United States tell Secretary Rumsfeld, sitting right next to him, that you're weapons free over Washington, D.C., that means we can shoot down anything. That means civilian airliners. But there was a decision process made, and it was a very open process. I have no idea what they're talking about when they do this. They're putting aircraft in the air, shooting something down. There's ways to look at those balloons if they had to. You fly it by it, you put your wingman by it, you make a decision on the ground. What are we going to do? This seems like if it's flying with 40,000 feet or lower, it's game. And it makes no sense to me at all.
Wow.
None.
That's going to boggle a lot of people listening to what you have to say right now, General. We had the chance to ask Ambassador Nikki Haley about this morning, and she suggested this isn't just a problem with China. This is a problem here at home. Listen.
You know, when it ended in South Carolina, that wasn't an accident. South Carolina is a military state. That balloon went over our military installations. And the idea that other balloons did that before means we not only have a China problem, we have a government problem.
Interesting statement by her. And now I want to ask you a question. We've been obviously talking about this for quite a long time now. The military, General, obviously has really zoomed in clear images of these balloons, potential hobby balloons, right? Because they got in there or as close as they could to determine whether they were manned or maneuverable or maneuvered, I should say. Wouldn't we be able to show those to the hobby guys and say, is this your balloon? Like, why do we not know who these belong to at this point?
Yeah, Sandra, it's a great question. Look, this goes back to what we talked about on the rules of engagement and a very simple fact that there's no coordination, it appears, in the White House in the sit room with the military and the National Command authorities. Of course they could go by that. This wasn't an immediate threat. Let's use the balloon over Lake Huron. Look, that was not a threat to anybody. It was 40,000 feet, shoot it down, fly by a couple times, take some imagery of it, make a decision, what do you want to do? But it seems to me they just went weapons free on a balloon. And I think it just shows the lack of decision making, the lack of serious discussions with the president or the Secretary of Defense. And of course we should be alarmed by it because this shows to me it's a greater problem on how do they make decisions. And that's a concern I've got. And look, you can go through the entire last 2 years. My concern is they make decisions in a very slow fashion and they're random decisions. There's no sense to them, especially with this balloon shoot down. They're 3 and 1. I mean, they shot $400,000 missile, a Sidewinder missile at 3 balloons that were industrial balloons or weather balloons. That makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, and they missed once, so they had to shoot it a second time. Yeah. So let's go to the bigger picture. This was the big kahuna balloon that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina. That belonged to China. It was a surveillance balloon. Reporters were trying to ask the president about it yesterday in something of a free-for-all in the South Court auditorium. He decided not to take questions, but he did call NBC correspondent Peter Alexander back to say the following. I think the last thing that Chinese President Xi wants to do is fundamentally rip the relationship with the United States and with me. Nikki Haley said about Biden's approach to China is it's unbelievably embarrassing to look up and see a Chinese balloon looking back down at us, and that this is fundamentally a change in the relationship between China and the United States, and that China feels like they're absolutely free to be able to send a balloon over the United States and thumb their nose at us.
I mean, this is really in your face. We used to call it in the old and back in the day. And that's what the Chinese have done. And I cannot believe that he says, well, it's really no harm, no foul. Of course it is. They flew over our most sensitive installations as part of the triad. both the 341st, the 90th and 91st missile wings, looked at the missile
and
field.
Whiteman Air Force Base, too.
And, yeah, with the B-2s. And it's like, really? And I think they're just avoiding the obvious, which is, look, China's an adversary. We better address it that way. They're not a friend of the United States. And we looked at that hard during the Trump administration. They're an economic threat. They're a military threat, they're a diplomatic threat, and they're an educational threat, too, with the Confucius Institutes. And the sooner we realize that and we start taking actions that way, the better off we're going to be.
All right, General Kellogg, really quick, we're about to get this press briefing. What do you want to hear from Kirby?
Well, I'd just like to hear the truth. Just come out and tell the American people, especially with the balloons, what they saw. And I would ask him, what were the rules of engagement to engage those balloons? Tell us the thought process behind it. That's the cutting message you need to find, because that's where you're going to find ground truth.
All right, we'll see if he gets asked that. General, great to see you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you, General. Russia